in the armed forces, an experience that I have to say has shaped my approach to leadership. But over the past decade, I've had the pleasure of transitioning into the agile change space. And I've played my part in several enterprise level transformations, all of varied scale and complexity. So I look forward to sharing some of that experience with you guys today, or tonight, I should say. I currently hold accountability at TSB for our agile operating model and the enterprise embedding of agile ways of working. So my remit at the bank includes working with leaders and executives to enable business agility and leading the agile coaching function. I think a couple of my team are on today, I can see, and overseeing our Atlassian tooling strategy. So for me, it's a role that really sits in that intersection of transformation, capability building, and cultural change, which is something I'm deeply passionate about. But enough from me. I would like to welcome in Rachel.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Really hope that you're going to enjoy it as much as we are. But just as a quick introduction, I am a transformation lead. I work alongside Samantha here at TSB Bank, but I've got quite a few years experience working at other organisations, but overall I've got over 25 years experience working in financial services industry. But aside from that, I'm also very much into the arts, and I do a lot of extra activity outside of my day job, transforming the arts, and particularly in Wales. I just thought I'd say to you that the transformation lead role, it's the third time that I've had this role in a different organisation. It's brilliant fun, it's highly challenging, and you are constantly in the thick of it. And I just thought I'd share with you that up front, how great a role it is, but you're always learning. You are always getting things wrong, and you are always able to apply your learning from getting things wrong really quickly and really effectively. And I'm still doing that very much up to this day. And my values, the things that get me out of bed, is creativity, a sense of belonging, and a sense of freedom. So I think hopefully you've got the sense of what I do as a transformation lead, and my values are a good match. Over to you, Shakira.
Thanks, Rach. So, yes, I'm here as the voice of the customer. So, look, I wasn't picked for embarking on our business agility journey at TSB because of my agile expertise. I had none, right? So my expertise at the time was I had a strong understanding of our organization, of our people, and the network to make things happen. So I had a reputation for navigating complexity and consistently delivering continuous improvement outcomes without taking endless months or filling out 18,000 forms. So whether it was strategy refreshes, branch transformations, or consumer duty implementation, I knew how to get things done. Now, I won't read out what's on the screen here. You can see the official job title and the blurb that sits below it. But in plain terms, today I get to shape and measure and learn from how we improve, how we deliver value across our portfolio. However, throughout our journey, I've been lucky to flex across transformation, agile ways of working chapter, value streams, and lean portfolio management in our pursuit of agility. So I've carried the golden thread across our journey. My path has been less about titles and more about impact. So if a role was missing in our pursuit of agility that week, I was it. So that's the perspective I'm going to share with you guys today. What worked, what didn't, and what really matters. Back to you, Samantha.
Thanks, Shakira, and thank you both for joining me. So as advertised, we are here to share some insights to do with the relationship that we see between the transformation program, and that's an important word, makes sense as we get into the presentation, the enduring agile capability and the crucial role of leaders in enabling agile within an organization. And we'll be drawing on our collective experience from the past 25 years for some of us. It isn't intended to be a success story, nor does it center around TSBs specifically. Rather, what we aim to provide this evening is a real world lens on agile transformations in financial services. And let's be honest, they're tough. The part that we're obviously all interested in as members of this meetup are the patterns and anti-patterns that we've collected along the way. So we will be sharing those with you today, and then the slides afterwards for you to refer to. I do intend to try and tempt some folks into the conversation with us this evening, as Jolt mentioned at the start. So I have included some questions throughout. They're not heavy questions. I'm not expecting much of people at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. Just a couple of light questions to get us talking. And I will warn you, I'm really good with awkward silences. My team will tell you. So, shall we get started? First of all, when we talk about agile or when we think about agile, we tend to think about it through multiple lenses, all of which play a really important part on their own and collectively. And in my experience, they tend to sit on that scale that we see between being and doing. And as practitioners, we understand that doing agile refers to the application of practices and tools. It shows up in our processes, in our events, in our frameworks. These are the enablers, if you will, to being agile. So my first question, what do we mean when we say being agile? What does being agile mean? And I think I'm going to get a little bit of help from Jolt just to see what's coming through in the chat. So pop it in the chat or feel free to come off mute. What do we mean by being agile?
So, application of an agile mindset. That's the first thing in the chat by Louise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anything else?
Flexible mindset, Suresh, thank you. Mindset, behaviors, culture, Alex. Tom, reacting and correcting progress towards success goals.
Nice.
Collaborative, delivering quicker, creating better flow, Helen. Embodying the agile mindset, Idris. First thing that comes to my mind is delivering value faster, Carol, if my pronunciation is correct.
Perfect. Some really great examples there, and obviously mindset is coming through very, very strongly. I forget where I heard it. I'm pretty sure it was Martin Fowler that said doing agile is like following a recipe. Being agile is like becoming a great chef. And recipes are important, right? They provide us structure, order, safety, and in our context in financial services, they're auditable and trackable, and they provide the necessary scaffolding that colleagues need to work in a somewhat consistent way. Ultimately, doing agile is observable, whereas becoming a great chef, we know that's never done. There are always new things to learn and to master, and understanding agile is very much embodying a mindset, which you guys have just said. The issue is it's not necessarily straightforward to prove adaptability or flexibility or mindset. It's not impossible, but it's less observable and it's more subjective. So it's understandable then why there are so many cases of organizations failing in their quest for agility. And that's largely due to the over-focus of observable applications of agile. I think we will have all heard of the Nokia example. It's possibly the one that's most widely referenced. How many of you here then, for my next question, have experienced or witnessed to any degree failure when it comes to embedding agile within an organization? Just give me a show of hands. How many people? Yeah, a couple of people. During our time together this evening, I want you to think about that balance between being and doing, and how this focus shifts quite rightly in a non-linear way. And we're also going to talk a little bit about agile transformations and failure as we get into it. So sticking with the theme of failure, let's explore why so many agile transformations fail. Or do they? Let me ask you another question. What are the benefits of introducing agile ways of working into an organization to achieve greater agility? Again, pop it in the chat, or you are welcome to come off mute and just shout out. What are the benefits of introducing agile to achieve agility?
I think Louise is trying to come off mute. Are you trying to come off mute, Louise?
No, I was trying to raise my hand.
Oh, right.
in as a precursor to coming off of mute. I think sometimes, because I've been around agile for a really long time, and what I have found is that small agile, you know, the little small practices do kind of creep in. So if you have agile in an organization long enough, whether you think it's successful at large scale or not, some of those practices do creep in. So we do find some small things like people feel more empowered to speak up in certain teams. They might be trying some small practices. That turnaround of fast feedback might also be starting to get established. So, but the organisation itself might sit there and say, "Oh no, agile failed." So I think that's one of those things, is that it's not always blanket across the board.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And you're touching on exactly the point that we'll make here. I like the way you put Louise as well on your name. That's pretty cool. Other thoughts? What are the benefits?
Pratik, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So just to make sure I understand, the benefits of basically shifting to an agile mindset of
the benefits of introducing agile into an organization to achieve greater agility. What are the outcomes that we're looking for?
Just to be, to add again, I've also been doing agile for a long time, but I came originally from a project and program management background, and then I kind of left the dark side and came over to the light. So it's good to have both those perspectives. To use your example of cooking, I find that introducing agile to organizations, people want to have their cake and eat it, but not break any eggs. So the things where I've seen time and time again is where agile has been sold into an organization as greater efficiency, higher quality work being done faster, cheaper, and with fast teams, is people not really understanding where those benefits and things come from, which is that in the first place, that if you go into an organization and something like what is your actual core product which generates your revenues, like your product or service or goods or whatever you have, and is everything, or is the majority organization optimized around producing and delivering that? And in that space, the things that you start looking at is waste. waste of process, waste of activity, waste of overhead management, people, all those things in there. So the benefits come is like I put it in the chat. What is an agile mindset? I coined this phrase some years ago to help understand it. To me, agile is merely the disciplined application of extreme common sense.
I love that.
Right. So all the I love the slide about business agility, but if you just again just step back from some of the jargon and the terms that which are very comfortable to all of us, and just at a very simplistic level, in some of the activities people do in organization, would you ever run your own home in this way? Right, in the way that we kind of spend money, the way that we kind of prioritize pieces of work and do things. Are we all actually always doing the most important thing? And if we find something that is harmful or painful or damaging to the way we do things, are we ruthless in getting rid of it? So I think the initial benefits you find is from in an organization is you go in there, and especially if you're a large organization, there's a lot of you would have, depending on the story, organic growth, rapid growth, things that may have been fit for purpose at some point in time are still there, but no longer necessary. So you start by going and getting rid of those things. You then go and find out, what do people want to do, and have large organizations put systems and processes in place that block people actually getting to do that, allowing people to do their jobs. So I think the benefits materialize, but kind of in a reverse way, rather than if you go and do agile, then suddenly everything's going to magically improve. It's not. I've never found it to be a silver bullet solution.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I've seen some comments in the chat. Look, we're all practitioners here, right? And there's so much experience in the room, so we will all align on what the benefits of agile are. But we also know how we tend to sell the benefits. Not we, but how the benefits tend to be sold into organizations. There are a standard set of industry aggregates. Some of them have been mentioned in the chat around flow, cycle time for development iterations, lead time from concept to value, release frequency, time to market, and then some more of the organizational cultural ones, such as colleague engagement. I think collaboration was mentioned, psychological safety, and all of that sort of stuff. And we're pretty used to seeing those industry aggregates pitched as, if you introduce agile ways of working as an organization, you'll achieve those benefits. And certainly not disagreeing. But if we think about the Agile Transformation Programme, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the programme aspect of introducing agile ways of working, because it tends to get a bit of a bad rap, but it has an important place. What we tend to do is we tend to measure the success or the performance of the programme in the same way that we measure agility, those outcomes that we've just talked about. And we know as experienced practitioners that it does take years to realise transformational results. There is a stark difference between transformation programme and transformational results. But we also know, and we've probably all found ourselves in a situation where the programme side of the transformation closes prematurely. And that's because, it really is tough to justify the cost of expensive transformational resources when they're no longer working on the observable aspects of introducing agile. We've moved away from the scaffolding and from the recipe, and we're now helping colleagues become the great chefs. And that is where all the great horse whispering comes in, and the less observable, less tangible things that we do to help colleagues. So for me, an agile transformation program is absolutely crucial as a catalyst for enabling an organization to become agile, to adapt iteratively, and to achieve transformational change So how do we stop the programs from failing? And for me, it very much starts with contracting upfront and recognizing the role of the agile transformation program and the role of leaders within the organization, which is why we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about leaders and making it explicit the part that they play in achieving transformational results. So if you find yourself in your next embarkment on an agile transformation program, make sure that those benefits that are articulated for it don't link to the transformational results, because a program will never deliver those. The organization will. And that's actually a perfect segue to Rachel, who's going to talk to us about transformation.
Hi, Samantha. Thank you for that. I'm just could you just bear with me for 30 seconds? Because unfortunately, I've been evicted from my building. So I'm just going into the one next door. I'm just going into that that building next door, but I'm really sorry that the timing is awful. I wonder whether you want to go to...
We're live.
Yeah. Sorry, I had no idea that the building closed at that time. So wonder if you want to go to Shakira and then come back to me.
Well, why don't we go to because I think it will go to my section first, and then we'll come back to Shakira. Should we do that?
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Okie doke. I'll try not to tease too much from your slides. We'll come back to the patterns and anti-patterns. I'm really sorry, guys. You're going to have to listen to me drone on for a little bit longer before you hear from Rach. Now, we wanted to include a fun fact about us all, just to humanize ourselves a little bit for those that don't know us. But I found out that I'm not very funny. Well, so my son likes to remind me anyway, but that is a fact, funny or not, about me. But less about me. I want to introduce you to one of my core teams here at TSB. The lovely people that you see on the slide here are who I've got the pleasure of leading. I think Sati and Kaz might be on the call, so feel free to give everyone a wave. And then the rest are going to catch up a little bit later on. And I say a pleasure, it truly is a pleasure. This slide represents possibly the most rewarding and challenging experience in my career so far, which is building an agile ways of working capability from scratch, from recruiting and forming the team and starting from a blank canvas. I've worked in both centralized and decentralized models in the past when it comes to agile teams and groups of practitioners, agile coaches. And I can honestly say I've felt the pain of leaning in too far either way. For me, when I've been involved in centralized models, that allows for consistency, shared standards, and a strong center of excellence. But it does also create distance. And that's when coaches get there's a risk of them being seen as outsiders, ivory tower advisors, rather than embedded partners, which is what we really need to gain the trust of colleagues within the organization. But then I've also found that on the flip side, when we embed coaches deeply in the work, fostering trust and insight becomes a lot easier, but it can also lead to duplication, isolation. Certainly felt that myself. And it's really difficult then to gain clear visibility. Can't get my words out. Clear visibility of those systemic impediments that we know hold us back. So for me, when I started to build this team, I saw this as a polarity to manage rather than a problem to solve. And I was really fortunate that my team aligned really early on the desire to try and flex both models at the same time, which has definitely been a challenge. But it's been worth it, because we're centralized just enough to share tools, to share resources, to share a collective kit bag, which I think as practitioners is so important, because we all have our strengths, but it's also decentralized enough that we can still be in the work with the people doing the work and building those authentic relationships. So if you do find yourself in that privileged position, I would highly recommend that blended approach. It takes work, but it really does pay off. And I know that we've kind of skipped the transformation bit, so this might feel a bit wonky, but we will come back to Rach in a second. But I do want to talk about that relationship between the transformation program and an agile ways of working capability, and how critical it is for success that collaboration and cohesion between agile practitioners and transformation leads, and also consultants. That we'll have a few consultants on the call today. Can't ignore that sometimes that relationship can get fractious. But our agile ways of working chapter, and we've used that term because it fits with the nomenclature. I can really struggle to say that word, of the organisation. So rather than introduce another term to confuse people, we adopted the language of the organisation. But whatever you call it in your companies, the capability in the transformation program, whilst they tend to be separate to varying degrees and operate as discrete entities in their own right, it is important that there is collaboration between the two. And I think that what I've learned is the efficacy of that collaboration has such a strong bearing on the success of achieving transformational change. And if we just have a look at kind of some of the key attributes, if you will, of each of those entities, the actual transformation program that initiates the change, often bringing in consultancy with deep expertise and playbooks, and their value can be absolutely immense in the early stages of an agile transformation. But there is a natural tipping point where that contribution starts to taper, and not because they're less capable and not because their expertise is no longer needed, but because the work shifts from general frameworks and it starts to become more about deeply contextualized implementation. And that's where we as agile practitioners and leaders within the organization needed to step in, not just to continue the work, but to own it. So it's not often you get an enterprise agile coach who owns the operating model as well, but that transition into BAU, I think, is a really important one. So if we think about where that handover point is, it will differ per organization. But consultants, in my opinion, and transformation specialists deliver the most value when the work is about structure, strategy, and best practice. And as we start to move into the nuances of organizational context, that's when we really need to pass the baton to embedded practitioners and, more importantly, leaders and colleagues within the organization. So we talked about the relationship with transformation, talent and consultancy and practitioners, which is possibly one of the most important. But there are lots of other really important partnerships. And the thing that I would like to stress in this slide is that transformation isn't just about frameworks, we know that, or programs. It's about people and partnership, and it really does take a village to sustain agility. And when those partnerships work, the impact is exponential. And I think many of you will have experienced this, where we tend to be working to really tight timelines and budgets, and we've only got a certain amount of resources to draw on. So for me, building a virtual team or an agile army has really helped in terms of scaling the impact of the capability that I lead and maintaining that momentum. I've definitely felt disconnected in the past from the wider organisation, which is really difficult when you're trying to influence at organisational level. So certainly one of the things that's helped me here is building really, really strong partnerships. And there are so many that I could talk to in terms of the folks that have helped us enable greater agility here. But the ones that stick out possibly the strongest are internal comms and local comms teams. We know that those folks can be instrumental in keeping colleagues informed. And we know that during times of change, you can't communicate enough. HR have absolutely played a vital role in shaping our agile curriculum, which is something we'll come on to. And if you decide, like I did, to move away from specific framework-specific training, like SAFe certifications, for example, that approach in terms of working with HR teams and learning and development allows you to lean on those true experts that really do have that experience in the colleague learning journey. And it enables you to tailor content for the learner. And we'll come on to that a little bit. And then lean portfolio management. So we've got Shakira here today. This collaboration is all about getting that balance right between governance and agility. And Shakira will talk to us about striking that balance here. But also we love a community of practice and a meetup, and we've got lots of communities of practice within the organisation that Monica, who you will have seen on the team slide, has established, and they've definitely become a vital support and development route for colleagues. And I really could go on, but I don't want to take up any more of Rachel's time, so I will just summarise on this little mini section around the first set of anti-patterns and patterns. So if you do find yourself in the same situation as me, rather than choosing a fully centralised or decentralised, I would definitely recommend building a mature team with diverse experience and managing that polarity. Try not to bring your practitioners in too late, but also build bridges, not silos, and don't put too much trust in the playbook. It's a great starting point, but what we do need to do is, and I can't help the military reference, is build an army. So with all that said, Rachel, do you want me to pass back to you? Are you back with us? Or shall I keep going?
am, yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Samantha.
No, you're okay.
Apologies, everyone, as well for that hiccup. So I'm just going to just build on what I was talking to you earlier about my, well, I've got 25 years of banking, financial services experience. I've got roughly 8 to 10 years of working in transformations across 3 different UK banks. So just to give you the context of what I'm going to talk about today, just give you some context to that. During that time, my transformation experience, I think I've led a number of initiatives and been part of the teams that Samantha has shared today. And the doing stuff that I've done ranges from reshaping operating models, embedding the new approaches to change delivery. And a lot of my time has been spent around empowering teams to embrace the changes and to apply them successfully. And then to the being side of things, very much around, I've got a lot of experience and I'm really passionately interested in cultural transformation shifts. What my experience has taught me is that transforming how an organization delivers change is rooted in the same principles. So wanting to achieve more flexibility, wanting to improve the quality, wanting to be able to deliver change at a faster time to market, it's all rooted in those. But it does manifest itself very differently in depending on the organization. And I think that that's rooted in, we had a comment earlier about someone with, traditional change management experience. And I think the core basics of change management deeply impact the path of your transformation journey. So cost, time, and scope. They all have an impact. So my experience therefore ranges from large scale scope with huge matched investment budgets to large scale scope and very lean budgets, and then going from a learning driven transformation, which was really shaped by and driven by utilizing people's previous experience and knowledge. But then the impact of that was on time, where you saw the elongated timeline and a lot more caution and a lot more tempered pace. So those core basics, time, cost, and scope, really do impact the journey. And I just kind of wanted to give that as an upfront. So what I thought I'd do is just take a few minutes to talk to you about 3 ingredients that can be added to any transformation recipe and make it really tasty. So the first one I'm going to talk about, which Samantha's referenced, is about planning a program to deliver a transformation versus enabling ongoing transformation. So they are 2 really different things, and the program really is like any other piece of change. You've got to adhere to time, cost, scope, and you've got to adhere to governance, and it's got to be done in a controlled manner. And I have had lots of my experience where you are challenged, and quite rightly so, around the approaches and changes you're making, and are they ensuring safety, and are they doing things in the right way, and is it enabling people to do things not just for the good stuff, but addressing all of the smaller details behind it. So delivering the transformation does have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It does adhere to time, cost, and scope, whereas a transformation of an organization isn't a one-time event. I'm just wondering if is that my slide that's changed, or oh yeah, great, thanks. So the program is controlled, whereas a transformation and the journey is all about the mindset, and it's all about trust, curiosity, and courage, and accepting that it's never done. And I think my experience would say that first phase of a transformation, definitely the second phase, is about building that capability and that mindset of relentless curiosity and continuous improvement. So achieving your first phase of a transformation, it can be the point of momentum loss. And I think that's where you see the difference between program ended, but transforming is continuing. And in my experience, this really is the point where people can overtly, but quite often secretly, revert to the old ways or their comfort zones. And what I would sort of reference taking the cooking analogy, return to making egg sandwiches and cheese on sticks, instead of maybe pushing the boat out and trying something like, sweet chili sauce and dips and things like that, which is maybe a bit more transformational than the traditional stuff. So that's the kind of experience I've got. That first phase, sometimes going into the second phase, how do you keep that momentum going? So while the project and program's done, the company is now adapted and adopted that way of thinking and that mindset that you've been working hard to implement. The next thing I wanted to talk about was some basic ingredients, things that I think are a given. when you're doing a transformation. And the first part of this is transformation always needs a why. And it needs to be a why. The purpose of it needs to be something that's digestible. And I think it is effective when it can be repeated at all levels. And if you can nail that and crack that, then you do see a greater level of success. But it's a basic ingredient is something that knowing and having a clarity on the why I have experienced has been some of my hardest times during all of the transformations that I've done. That the real purpose, the real understanding of why we're doing this isn't clear. And, you know, it's been the most important challenge for me to resolve. So you have to live the values, you have to be the agile principles, you have to find a way through. And sometimes you can feel like you're the only person doing that, but it is a basic ingredient that you need to have, that you running a transformation, being part of that team, it's important for you to understand the why and to be the why and to embody all of the things that come with that. Otherwise, you lose the momentum. But if you can stick with it and you work through that basic ingredient, what you do is start to see those small, what I call aha moments, where people use the why, understand the purpose, and it helps them in their day-to-day to face the reality of being able to deliver a transformation. The next thing then I wanted to just talk about really quickly was good leadership, good communication, and being people-centered. Samantha's talked a lot about leadership and she's talked a lot about communication. So I'm gonna skip on just to my section on people, but I'm really happy to talk about the others if you want to pick them up in the questions. But from a people perspective, I just wanted to emphasize they aren't the process, they are the process. They are part of it, but they are it. If you can get your people on board, then you're really on your right way to success. And transformations are so emotional and they can be deeply personal. And often what you're doing with a transformation as part of the program, but then the ongoing mindset is you are asking people to change what they knew, to move into an area of discomfort, adapt, and then apply that learning and accept that they won't get it right and that they will fail. And if you think of the traditional project and program management way of working, failure, we know, is not really something that's acceptable. So that's why I think it can be deeply personal for someone to have to go through those moments of discomfort, and why people are so important. And so some questions that I've got that I ask myself around getting that mix right. How do you get people to work together effectively? Do you need to incentivize that? And I don't mean that through a monetary perspective, but more creative ways. What connects them and what's their common goal? Have you got innovative rituals in place that people can use to expand their mindset and their ways of thinking? And does everybody have a route in? Is it inclusive so that everybody, wherever they are, has the opportunity to shape what the transformation means for them in their job, in the work every day? So it moves then from them just being told and receiving it to being a part of it. And that's where you see things like co-creation, building ownership, and better relationships. So I think if I move on to the next slide, what I wanted to do then was just talk about 3 of my favourite toppings that I like to sprinkle over a transformation. And I'm really sorry about all my little puns, but hopefully you're finding them a bit amusing. But I think these things I'm just going to share with you quickly really help people with success. So 1% nudges are way more effective than trying to make big, huge transformational steps. Start with something small and get little proofs of concept, little experiments, little new habits that you can introduce to people. And I know the agile coaches that we've got are brilliant at doing and nudging things along in the right direction. Be an evangelist. And I heard this many years ago. I had someone come and do an event where they talked about being an evangelist for agile methodology. And one of the phrases that they use, and it's always stuck with me, is around culture eat strategy for breakfast. And that's taken from a guy called Peter Drucker. But it doesn't matter how strong the business case is for the transformation. It doesn't matter how strong the strategy is and how brilliant it's been written. If the culture doesn't support it, it will be harder and it's likely to fail. So thinking about be confident to lead through the people side of a transformation, I think, is really important. Enveloping those values, beliefs and behaviours. And then the last thing I wanted to do was just talk about, from a people perspective, is about giving people more freedom. My experience, I've got loads of examples where giving people that freedom, you see a massive change, enabling them to act like their own entrepreneurs. I see a much more success in a transformation than if we try and control and limit that freedom. And then encouraging the leadership to be removers of obstacles and to understand what true servant leadership is. And it's a phrase that I think gets thrown around, but really I don't think until people really put their mind to it to understand what it truly means and what change that requires, it can cause friction. And I would just encourage that. And then last but not least, my favourite thing to sprinkle would be what Samantha has referenced and you'll hear more about, is a continuous learning and development embedded into the culture. And that approach, I think, is your key to success. So finally, there are my anti-patterns and patterns, just to recap those points that I've talked to, and I have rushed it a bit. I'm really sorry for doing that. But I'm going to pass on to Shakira now so that she can share her views with you.
So it's unfortunately it's not quite at Shakira yet. It's down to my last thing you'll hear from me. And I did see that we had a question in the chat about how do we get leaders involved. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what Rachel just touched on there in terms of learning and development. We know that leaders can make or break an agile transformation because they are the transformation. As Rachel's just said, it's a continuous journey and it has to be owned by the organisation. But we also need to accept that there are a lot of executives and senior leaders that don't feel equipped to promote the benefits of agile. And sometimes that can lead to them managing in ways that run counter to the principles that we're trying to introduce. And I don't believe that that's intentional. As we touched on earlier, contracting with the organisation on the role that a leader plays in embedding agile is absolutely critical. But we need to acknowledge the reality that in most organisations, a significant portion of leaders, especially those outside of agile delivery, do have limited exposure to agile ways of working. And before we can expect them to become advocates and to adapt their functions to enable greater agility, they first need to have a healthy understanding of what agile truly is. And unfortunately, I'm yet in my career to find a shortcut to that. If you do have one, bottle it and sell it. I'll buy it. We can't simply empower leaders and expect results. They don't have the competence and confidence and the understanding of the agiles and principles and practices and what that potentially can mean for the functions that they lead, not just in technology, but all of the colleagues that surround change that are involved in it in some way, shape or form. We can't expect them to do that without understanding. So for me, scaling agile and transformational results don't come from scaling frameworks. I think we'll all agree with that. It comes from scaling understanding. And I do say understanding intentionally rather than knowledge, because most senior leaders don't need a deep knowledge of some of the intricacies of agile ways of working, but they do need to understand it. And when they do, they become the enablers to agility. Certainly in my experience, they create those conditions that Rachel talked about for colleagues to challenge legacy constraints, and then they will model the cultural change that we're trying to embed. So it won't be news to folks on this call that there are different levels of understanding when it comes to understanding agile, based on a number of factors, including proximity to those agile teams that are delivering, roles and seniority. But also within the organisation, there'll be different business areas and capabilities that have different learning needs and common learning needs, which is why I've worked really closely with HR so we can cater specifically for those needs. So rather than kind of shopping from the list of safe certifications and putting people into those boxes, here what we've done is we've drunk our own champagne, essentially, and we've built our learning curriculum based on the learning needs of individuals, based on the jobs that they do and how they interact with agile teams. So if we take second line risk colleagues as an example, because it's something we will all come across in financial services, if we consider the typical team archetypes, they're never going to be a full-time member of an agile team. But regardless of whether they're showing up to an event to advise on the risk implications of a new product or service, or to provide independent oversight, they need to understand what they're walking into and what good looks like, and why it runs that way, and what the purpose of it is. So building our curriculum is very much being based on segmentation for those in terms of proximity to the agile teams. And you know, we have our own kind of infographic with all the clickable things that gives us a nice comfort blanket that we get from some of our frameworks. But it's contextual to our organisation, and it has all of our nuances in language and the specific roles that we've introduced, and it feels like a TSB curriculum, which I think is really, really important. But before I hand over to Shakira, operationalising agile and scaling agile, as I said, through understanding, that involves learning, which is the start point but not the end, seeing and experiencing in those agile practices, so bringing colleagues to the work, which is obviously something that we encourage, but then with that understanding, leaders can lead by example and embed agility in a tailored way, in a way that makes sense for the functions that they lead. And then they're going to share the agile successes. It's not going to have to come from a central team. And what that does for colleagues across the bank is they understand what support is available to them. They know that it's tailored for them, with them in mind, and then they will start to engage with it more, and then they will start to experiment. And that's when all of those results of little pockets of agile that I think somebody mentioned at the very start, they start to compound. And that's when we start to see transformational results. So in my experience, leaders that I work with are grateful for that translation piece, and it can't go far enough, because they face resistance to change themselves. So any help that we can lend to leaders will enable the change that we're trying to introduce. Now, we will time out, so we're happy to stay on and carry on. We will do that, so we've got the content for the recording. I invite anyone who wishes to stay on with us so we can get through the rest of the slides. Sorry that we've run over. So I'm going to skip over this slide and I'm going to hand to the lovely Shakira.
Thank you, Samantha. So look, I'll try my best to keep Samantha and Rachel's recipe theme going. I don't know if Pratik is still on, but if we just move on to the next slide, please. We have cake. So the journey started with a simple vision. Like Rach says, start with why. Deliver more frequent, predictable changes so that we can better respond to our customers' needs. Of course, simple doesn't mean easy. If it did, I wouldn't, and probably a lot of you here on this call today, wouldn't still be standing or sitting here talking about our journeys years later. So this wasn't about adding ceremonies, rituals, or stand-ups. It meant rethinking how we made portfolio decisions, how we governed change, how we learn, and how we built trust. Now, we had to balance consistency with flexibility. So what worked well in value stream A, lemon drizzle, or value stream B, lemon drizzle with icing, looked very different to what worked in value stream C. You've got the chocolate fudge cake there. Now, for those of us that have read Sooner, Safer, Happier, it says every organization's context is unique. I can confirm that even inside our organization, every value stream, feature team, or team has its own DNA. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we anchored the transformation on these principles: predictability, value, safer governance and quality, and happier outcomes. And that is what became our compass. So now on to the next slide. And I promise, like, I haven't paid Pratik for some of these comments that he's put in the chat today, but on to getting buy-in, right? So getting buy-in isn't a one-off. It is constant. You don't win it once, you re-win it every time something or someone changes. So execs weren't convinced by ceremonies, stand-ups, thanks Pratik, stand-ups or post-it notes. They bought in when they saw real outcomes. So PI showcases, demoing value, real business outcomes, instead of PowerPoint decks with Gantt charts and RAG statuses, or dashboards linking OKRs to portfolio data, or real lessons learned where teams started to own their improvements. And trust was built bottom up. So our weekly and bi-weekly communities of practices created safe spaces for learning and honesty. At one point, our business agility journey or transformation journey community of practice, we called it Breakfast Club, had 10% of the organization in attendance, up to and including some of our execs. So that's more than some town halls get. People voluntary attending, curious to learn. So the patterns we leaned into were link agile to business outcomes, build communities of practice as trusted ecosystems, and focus on mindset and psychological safety. And then avoid selling agile as ceremonies or tools, rushing exec buy-in without data, and imposing one-size-fits-all checklists. I think one of the best shifts was moving teams away from agile mobilization checklists, that program element Rach and Samantha touched on, and towards teams building their own continuous improvement backlogs. So tasting the recipe and making multiple iterations. That's when we saw real ownership grow, as well as few arguments about whose checklist was right. On to the next slide, please, Samantha. So yes, so here we're going to talk a bit about data and insight. So when I started, dependencies lived in individual Excels. We replaced that with Jira. Suddenly, everyone had visibility, dependencies, risks, commitments, all transparent. And once this is made visible, it's easier to make decisions. For example, what do we need to do to break these dependencies, and what is the impact of that? We automated governance too. So things like legal, regulatory, or mandatory references and PI commitments flagged compliance risks early without manual admin exercises. PI planning went from being an awareness or promotional exercise to a genuine working session. That's real trade-offs, real priorities, real schedules and plans, and real value. And dashboards. Dashboards changed the game. Teams started using them in their retros and communities of practice to understand blockers, not as vanity reports, but as living tools. Sometimes the data looked rough, as it does in every organization when you start this journey. But this drives accountability because you want to fix it. Transparency builds trust, and that trust keeps teams and leaders engaged. So, with these dashboards and how we started to speak across the organization, is we shifted from outputs to outcomes. It was less about, number of changes or how many widgets have we shipped, but more about Have we delivered value? Are we improving flow efficiency? And are we ultimately making our customers happier? In one value stream, for example, they really struggled with lagging metrics. They wanted to tweak them rather than wait and see the true impact of their work. That taught us patience, which ironically, no one had. Governance also became contextual. Samantha touched on that earlier. So value stream A needed something different to value stream B, but the principle was the same. While governance is important, it should enable flow, not block it. And critically, we avoided rigid controls or disconnected reporting. Our governance framework became a supported system, simplified, standardized, and right-sized so that it balances autonomy and empowerment of the value streams, but with swift escalation so that we can inform enterprise decision-making where necessary. Not a bureaucracy, well, less of a bureaucracy anyway. As we know, transformation is an ongoing, iterative journey of continuous learning, adaptation, and cultural change. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So we learned quickly and real fast that big bang rollouts don't always work. So we treated the change framework, our SDLC itself, as an experiment. So we iterated, we refined, we adapted, we created multiple transition states based on feedback from our teams. So one of our biggest wins was the small change process. It cut cycle time to a quarter of the standard change process, enabling us to continuously deliver small, high-impact changes and fixes sooner to our customers, improving customer experience, and supporting to deliver against our money confidence purpose. That was massive. People loved it. We also automated governance and QA checks in Jira and Confluence. That gave teams confidence that they could move fast without breaching compliance or risk tolerance. And because everything was visualized, decision-making sped up. Now, don't get me wrong, while each team is working hard to optimize flow, improve their cycle times, and so on, collectively, as one business, we are working hard to optimize that end-to-end system flow and optimize lead times from idea through to customer. But that's why feedback loops like communities of practice we've spoken about, retros, green zone sessions, and hackathons are so important. They have kept continuous improvement alive. This journey hasn't been a big bang rollout. It's an adaptive evolution. Or you could put it another way, organized trial and error. On to the next slide, please. Thank you. I think that's meant to be me on the slide. So yeah, my role throughout this journey hasn't just been about frameworks and dashboards. It's been about protecting culture. Because I flexed across transformation roles, Scrum Master in the value streams and Agile Ways of Working chapter and Lean Portfolio Management, I became the custodian of the agility journey, that golden thread, which sounds glamorous, but mostly meant being the one in the room still saying, remember why we're still doing this. That meant carrying lessons learned into each phase, helping new leaders understand the context, advocating for team autonomy and psychological safety when new processes threaten to destabilize things. It also meant making sure our business agility journey served the people, not the other way around. And sustaining momentum with small touches really mattered. So recognition, logos, etc. To summarize, right? The sooner, safer, happier community, Rachel and Samantha, you've all said it. People and culture sit at the heart of agility. Everything else is secondary. So, what have I learned? Thank you, Samantha. We need to build safe learning environments. So whether that's your communities of practice or green zone or teams environments. We need to protect psychological safety and advocate for our teams. We need to engage execs with outcome metrics tied to business impact. Visualize absolutely everything because that clarity drives accountability. Clean data and automate governance to enable flow. Adapt your frameworks to your context, don't copy and paste. And use small batch changes to speed up learning and delivery. Replace your offline siloed spreadsheets with transparent collaborative tools. and democratize insights with live dashboards. And keep asking yourself, if you could put your portfolio on one page, what would you want to see and why? Most importantly, right, it's never done. The mission is relentless. It's about continuously improving the MI, deepening the insights and ways of working to deliver better for our customers. And remember, cultural change takes time. I've lived it. Just when you crack the code and get buy-in, something changes and you're back explaining again. But this time, you've got more allies, more understanding, and more momentum. It can be messy, painful, and sometimes exhausting. And that's just the retros. But it's also been worth it. Because this isn't just about agile, it's about building an organization that can adapt, learn, and deliver value sooner, safer, and happier. I'll now hand back to Samantha, Joel, and Anne for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you